Hey guys, welcome back. I'm going to be doing a demo of this portrait, and I'm going to follow the process that I described in the previous video, and that is basically a posterized version of this. We're going to simplify things down into 5 values. We're going to simplify it down into very straight-edged shapes, very simple shapes, and everything's going to have a sharp edge to it. This is an exercise. It's not going to look like a finished portrait. That's not the point. I'm specifically doing this to kind of limit you, to force you to think of certain things. And I'll go through all that as I do this. Before I get into the pencil drawing, I'm gonna do a very quick thumbnail with some markers just to show you guys how I would typically approach a portrait if I'm trying to simplify something. Little thumbnails are a great way to just kind of brainstorm and think through some problems before you jump into a larger drawing. And I'm not showing this to you guys with markers because I want you to also do it with markers. I just want to show you a very, very quick version of what I'm going to do in this demo so that you kind of know what's up ahead and how I'm going to be organizing the values. So I'm going to start with this very light one and just map in the shapes. So very quick shape of his head. This is going to be a very simple version of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify it into 5 values. And the first value I'll put down is the shadow value. It's going to be the lightest shadow value. And so it'll be something like this, where pretty much the side of the nose, the entire shadow of the eye, and then just this little triangle on the cheek is going to show through. The entire bottom of the nose is shadow. Most of the lips, under the chin, or under the jaw, all of the hair. The entire mass of the hair has to be that darker value. Even the parts of the hair that are light are going to be this kind of shadow value because it's so much darker than the skin. And then this whole eyebrow and a little bit of the eye socket. Not the entire eye socket is shadow, just the inner part, like the middle portion, like that. And then what I'm going to do is go into the shadows and find the darker darks, which is the eyebrow, the eye inside, and I'm simplifying this quite a bit for this drawing. Most of the hair except the highlights. And there's a little bit of a highlight in here, and in here, right there, and a little bit of one right there. Now I'm seeing some values within the neck and jaw, but I don't have enough values in order to separate that because I have to separate the hair from the shadows on the face. And if I do that, then I have no more values left. But I can use some of these darker values in like the nostril, like I did on the eye here, a little bit on the eyebrow in here, a little bit on the lips. And then I'm going to come into the light part and get some of these darker halftones, like in here on the forehead, in here, between the eyes, the cheek, side of the cheek, inside the eye, side plane over here. Pretty much the whole chin. A lot of this whole bottom area of the jaw is much darker than some of the highlights around here, or some of the lighter halftones at the top. And then this entire neck. And I'll probably also make the whole background this dark halftone. Okay, and then the lightest halftones are just going to be pretty much everything else in the face except the highlights. So on the nose, there's a very clear highlight right there. And then maybe on the cheek and the forehead, and that's pretty much it. Some in the ear. Oh, I forgot. Pretty dark. Okay, so this is how I'm going to organize my values. So now I'm going to switch over to a new page and do the same thing, but with graphite, more slowly, a little bit bigger, and observe the shapes a little bit better. And instead of the 4 markers that I used, I'm going to use 4 different pencils. HB, 2B, 4B, and 6B. Start my land with the HB. So the first thing I like to do is kind of just mark off the size of the face. It's going to be in here because I want to make sure I have enough for the neck and the collar. And as I put these shapes down, I want to be thinking of very straight lines. I'm thinking of angles. So this is the bottom of the chin. From the chin to the cheekbone, seeing this edge like that, then up. This might be a little too high up. We'll see. Yeah, probably just a little bit. So you see how you can get a pretty close shape to what you're seeing, but with only a few lines. You have to look for where's the best place to put a corner and still get the curve that you're seeing in the photo without actually putting a curve. So obviously this is a very good exercise to train your eye to see correctly. You probably won't get everything right. That's just the nature of it. It's very difficult to lay things in with perfect proportions. But every time you do it, you just try to get a little bit closer. You train your eye a little bit more to be able to judge things better. In here, I'm actually gonna just simplify and design it a little bit. There's too many curves in there. And I feel like I might need to make his head a little bit longer, maybe. When I'm not sure, I start measuring using my pencil. So I could like close one eye, make a measurement of something, and then compare it to something else. One really useful measurement to figure out if your face is too long or too wide is to measure it against the width of the head. So I'll take a measurement from here to here on the photo and compare it to this and see how it relates. So the width should go like up to here from here. Nope. So it should be taller. Yeah. So this definitely needs to be like all the way up here. So I felt like that was the case, and measuring it confirmed it. So I definitely need to move some stuff up. Cheekbone up here. And obviously the top of the head will move up as well. This part is a very long part of the drawing. It just requires you to just constantly observe, process it, put it down, and then look again to make sure what you put down is the same thing that you're seeing. Just back and forth, and you finish one line, you move on to another line. And like I said, I want you guys to be simplifying everything to straights. So like the hair, this shape of the hair, I can simplify it to maybe 4 or 5 lines. It's one straight out of the cheek. On the other side, I could see, okay, it comes out of kind of like the Adam's apple, like that. And then this part I can simplify it to maybe, yeah, like this and this. So 4 lines, very simple shape. I don't want to be drawing all the little ribbons of hair that I'm seeing through here. This is just one big shape that I'm mapping in. Okay, now coming into the face, I think this is probably a good contour of everything. As I go into the face, now I'm starting to look at the shadow shapes, not just the border of each item. The biggest shape in here is, going across the eyebrow, down the nose, under the bottom of the nose, back across, and then kind of around the lips in here, which around the lips is probably the most challenging part for you guys to be able to simplify those down, because there's so many things that could be halftone, but is it shadow? And all the pieces are really skinny. So that's the challenging part here. And as you do the lips, just keep thinking, simplify, simplify, simplify. Try not to just copy what you're seeing, process it, simplify it down to some kind of geometric shape, and then put it down. pretend it's not lips. If you really need to, you know, flip it upside down if you ever heard of that trick. Flip your photo upside down, flip your drawing upside down, and just observe the shapes. One thing that helps is to draw a center line very lightly as you kind of go down with these shapes in here. Helps you place the features on that center line. So brow ridge kind of comes out straight, then down a little bit, and then down even more. Pretty much 3. I could have simplified it into 2. Straight down the nose. And then in here, so this is a little tricky part because the bottom of his nose right here is getting some light reflecting back onto it. And the shadow is looking a little bit light, but it's still a shadow. So I'm going to group that in with the shadow part. A little shape like that. There's a little notch right here on the lip, but I'm starting with just this cast shadow from the nose. As I put this shape down, I'm thinking of 2 shapes actually. I'm thinking of how tall is this shadow shape of the eye, and then how tall is this light piece. And I'm kind of observing it and figuring out, okay, where is the border? And then this goes down, keeping it real simple. There you go. I hope you're seeing how constructing everything out of straight lines really helps to measure, because I'm identifying corners. And when I have these corners in my mind, when I look up there, it's easier to compare them to the other corners that I've established. Curves are kind of ambiguous. It's like, what part of the curve am I judging against the other part of the curve? Now, the only reason I'm putting the little separation in the lip is because it's just going to help me place the shadows. Everything around this area is actually a shadow. So this is not a border of a shadow, which I'm really just supposed to be drawing the borders of the shadows right now, but it's going to help me place things correctly. And actually I need to adjust this cast shadow a little bit. This entire shadow shape right here needs to be combined into one shape. The stuff up here, those are halftones. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate what's a halftone, what's a shadow. You'll get better at it. To me, it helps to squint a little bit, not too much because then you just can't see anything. Just squinting a little bit helps to group the darker darks, which are the shadows. And then the lip, so the bottom of the lip here is the edge of a shadow, and then it casts a shadow onto the chin like that, and then it kind of hooks back around this way, like that. Oh, and I did forget about that little hook. That's the shadow on the neck. So this is the light part of the neck. This is the shadow part on the neck. Okay, coming back up, I think the only thing left is like this eye and then maybe some shapes in the ear, if I want to get into those. Again, squinting really helps. Like right now I'm squinting to be able to simplify the shadow shape of the eye because I'm seeing so many little details in there, but really I just need to get the big shape. And I haven't really decided if I want to get this shape right here to be shadow or halftone. It's a transition from shadow to halftone. So maybe just like a little piece of it, I'll say that's shadow. Pretty complicated shape. Okay, so I just stepped back for a few minutes and I sat back down because I wanted to kind of clear my mind out of this. And when I sit down, I'm seeing mistakes right away. This is something I recommend you guys do as well before you move on to the value step. This jaw is kind of coming out too far this way. I need to slice off a little bit of it. And unfortunately, I'm just gonna have to adjust a lot of these shapes because of the corrections, but that's okay. This is part of learning. We're not trying to get it right the first, I mean, we are trying to get it right the first time, but that's very, very challenging to do. And when you make a mistake, the right thing to do is just fix it. By fixing your mistakes and by looking for mistakes, you're going to improve your eye to be able to see things more accurately. Making mistakes and then finding them and then correcting them is part of the process. And actually, yeah, now that I cut this in, the neck is too far out, so I need to bring the neck in more like that. Yeah, that's looking better for sure. Something in here is still off. Like, this looks thick and maybe the nose is too short. He's got a longer nose and this just does not feel like it's long. So I'm gonna make this a little skinnier. Maybe bring this whole shape down a little bit. Yeah, unfortunately it does have to be moved down completely. And then, yeah, because I brought in this shape, now the corner of the lip is too far. But that doesn't even matter because it's inside of the shadow. It's more about fixing this shadow shape in here. I lengthen the nose. This needs to drop a little bit. Lots of little corrections. And yeah, this eye socket, something's up with it. This needs to be higher up. This angle from here to here is off. And same thing with the angle from the eye, the bottom of the eye. I think I just need to raise it up. Yeah, that looks a little better. This ear looks small. Probably a little bit too low. Okay, last thing I'm gonna map in here before I start putting in the values is the little shapes in the ear, just because they are there. They're very little, but it's okay. I'm gonna simplify them to very basic geometric shapes. So like in here, I got this kind of shape, then a little bit lower. Yeah, this shape kind of groups in with the hair. A little hook. And then another one here. And all of that kind of groups in with the hair. Okay, so that's close enough. I spent quite a long time on it just to make sure that the proportions are good. The video you watched was probably cut up a lot quicker than it actually was. I spent probably an hour and a half laying it in. So just for your own reference, if you spent less than that, you probably rushed it because it is a complicated lay-in. There are a lot of little shapes to judge. And if you went longer than that, that's fine too. It's okay to measure everything 5 times because you're just training your eye to see better. So, okay, I'm just gonna jump right into a 4B for the shadows and start filling them in. And we'll speed this up as well because you don't need to watch me fill in shapes. But as you do this, try to keep your shapes clean. You've identified the edge, and the tendency is as you fill them in, they get a little blurry, a little bit wishy-washy. You know, as you put your lines down, they mess up that edge. And so try to clarify those shapes, clean them up as you shade. You know, like boop, boop, boop. These angles, I'm cleaning them up as I'm shading around them or inside of them. And at this point, I'm not even really looking at my reference. I'm just going to fill in the shapes I drew. Because if you look at your reference, your tendency is going to be to start putting little details that you're seeing in your reference. And that's not what you want. Right now, I just want to separate the shadows from the lights. Only look at your reference if you're unsure of what to fill in. Or if some shape maybe looks like it might be wrong as you're filling it in. You want to double check it. Look at your reference, see if you need to correct a shape. It's never too late to make a correction in your drawing. If after you fill everything in, you notice that the nose is too short, well, that's unfortunate, and it is harder to erase things and remap in the shapes after you've shaded it, but you gotta do what you gotta do. It's better to fix it. And for you level 2 people, I do still recommend you watch the level 1 demo, because I was saying things in there that I might not repeat in this demo that would still be relevant to you. So I do recommend watching it at least once. You could maybe watch it at 150% speed if you want. And so you can see as I'm filling this in, nothing's really changing. It's just getting darker. I'm not adding more detail. I'm just filling it in. I want this to look like a paper cutout version of the portrait. This isn't the time to be showing off. Don't go beyond what this project is and try to show how well you can shade. Like, I know you can go beyond what we're doing in this specific project, and you could, you know, make your edges a little bit softer and a little bit more accurate to what the photo is. But I want to actually see how well you can simplify. I want to see how disciplined you are. Can you hold back and just do the exercise? That's more impressive to me. You have to be able to separate a personal project from a class project. A class project is not a portfolio piece. Sometimes they could end up being that, but that's not what you're going for. A class project is to get better at something. That's it. It's to give you the skills to be able to do the personal projects better. So this is a class project. This is an exercise. Well, there's actually several things that you're working on here, but it's to improve your skills. So step 1 was to get better at proportions, right? Develop your eye and be able to simplify shapes. Step 2 is to be able to organize your values. Can you look at a photo and group values together into only 5? I know you could see 17 values in there. Most people could see little patterns of different values, but being able to simplify them down into just 5, that's the trick. That's challenging, and that's very, very useful. You know, you look at a portrait painter like Sargent, and you take one of his paintings into Photoshop and you grayscale it. You'll see how simple, how much he reduced the amount of values in his painting. And it's got such a powerful effect. It's just clarity of communication. You don't have to say more. Brevity is actually really good in making the listener or the viewer of your piece understand what you're saying. So that's what we're practicing here in step 2. And also, of course, we're practicing being able to fill in large areas of tone very clean. If you were to immediately start putting in little gradations and like little details that you're seeing, you would hide the uncleanliness in those details. You wouldn't realize how you need to work on being clean and precise with your shading because some of the mistakes could be seen as just little random details that show up. That's a lot of things that we're practicing here. Can you keep your value consistent? Can you keep your lines clean? Can you keep the design of the shapes that you laid in all the way through to the end? Or do they start to get all blurry? I'm going to shade in the hair, and just to not lose that corner, I'm going to put that in with a 6B. Just that edge. getting lazy. I don't want to find that measurement again. I just did it. So I know that this whole shadow shape of the hair is going to go even darker in the next step. So I'm not too worried about perfecting it all the way right now. And I'm not going to draw all the details in the shirt. I want to find a way to fade away with just some graphic shapes. One thing you might notice that is happening as you do this is the bottoms of your fingers are starting to get dark. So you're smearing everything along the page, and you want to try to avoid that as much as you can. It's hard to avoid because you should be putting your finger on the page as you shade, because shading like this is, you don't have as much control if you try to hover. Stabilizing your hand with your finger is the right way to do it. I think some people try to train their hand to not hover, but some of the best draftsmen I know stabilize their hand with their finger. It works for them, it works for me. And what I do if I have an area, like if I shaded this whole area and I need to stabilize my hand on this really rendered area and I don't want to smudge it, I will get a little piece of paper and put it on top so I don't smudge it. That would be the solution, not to hover my hand. But if you do notice that like the bottom of your hand is like really dark, you can wash your hand, because all that graphite, or if you're using charcoal, all that charcoal is now going in the light spots. You're just kind of smearing it from your hand to the light spots. Sometimes, like I just noticed myself, I'll use my elbow to stabilize. For this angle, it just works because I have to shade up and down. I'll kind of lock my wrist and shade with my entire forearm. The point is, you do need to stabilize something. If you are doing gestural curves, like big curvy lines, no, you're not stabilizing anything. I'm talking about like when you're trying to be very precise. Also, make sure if you're noticing that your pencil's getting a little bit too dull, you sharpen it. Like I was about to get into the ears here and there was a little shapes. I want to sharpen it. But then I realized, well, maybe I'll just use a duller pencil for this large area of hair. Which actually, I'll do that. Before I get to the ear, I'm going to fill in the hair. Because the duller pencil will make it easier to fill in this large shape. And you might notice that I'm kind of changing the direction of my strokes as I'm wrapping it around the head. I mentioned when I gave you guys the assignment that you're thinking of this as a sculpture, like you chiseled it with big planes. I'm thinking of these as big planes as I wrap around the head. I'm not thinking of the direction of the hair, because his hair is actually pulled back in that area. I'm thinking of it as a sculpture, and what's the plane, the direction of the plane, not the strands of hair. It's a very common mistake when people draw hair, is they immediately start thinking of strands instead of form, the volume, which we'll get into all of that much more later in the course. Okay, almost done. So let me sharpen my pencil. So little pieces on the ear. We pretty much have a 2-value drawing now, and it's gonna look pretty decent at this point. It should read very well. You should be able to tell what's going on. I mean, clearly it looks like a dude. Not really sure how much detail I want to start putting in here for the little shapes. Don't want to get too carried away, but some of them are kind of nice. They add a little bit of interest. Details in a few places are kind of nice. You just got to pick the right ones. Just adding these 2 strands of hair, actually 3, I added a little detail in here, kind of makes the hair look more complex. Maybe just add like a little one right here. And it looks like hair just with those few little strategically placed locks of hair. And everything else is just a cutout. And even these are like, they're just grouped into the same value. They're not really that detailed. So in the level 1 demo, what I did was I started with this shadow value, then I went in with the darkest shadow value, and then I went in with the medium halftone and the darker halftone, and then kept the highlights. So this time I'm gonna go in a different order. Instead of going with the dark shadow shapes right now, I'm gonna go in with the medium halftone. So I'm kind of going from the middle values out to the darks and the lights. But it really doesn't matter, honestly. Like, you could go in whatever order you want. The only thing I would really highly recommend is you start with this shadow value. That's the first thing that you put down, because that clearly separates your lights from your shadows. This gives you the read so quickly that if you start with any other value, you just might get it wrong. It's hard to see what you're doing without this big separation. Instead of going to the dark accents right now, I'm going to go to the darkest halftone, and that's going to be my 2B. Going to sharpen it. With tones in the light areas, as opposed to the shadow areas, you generally want to keep your pencil sharpened more. When I was doing the hair, I was okay with a really dull pencil. When I get into the lights, I want to have it sharpened a little bit more than the shadows, or I'll just sharpen it more often, because I want my lights to be a little bit more detailed, a little bit more crisp. That'll bring the attention to the light areas. It's not a hard rule, but it's generally this is something that I try to do. Okay, so looking now at the lights and figuring out what are the darkest part of those lights. So the two large areas that I'm seeing immediately, like I just got to fill this in, is this whole shape in the neck and this whole little window on the cheek. Those are the dark halftones. So I'm just going to go in and give it a nice clean halftone shape, making sure it's still lighter than the shadow. Same thing in here. Let's see, pick a direction. Probably this way. Just thinking about the neck and it's wrapping around this way. Oh, and one thing I mentioned during the pair demo that I do want to repeat to you guys is that I want you to avoid smudging. I did a little bit of that just now, caught myself not to do too much. You don't want to try to get to a clean tone by smearing it. I'm trying to train you guys to be able to fill in clean tone directly with the pencil. This is part of the exercise. It's part of the training. If you're constantly depending on getting clean tones with either a blending stump or with your finger, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get those really rendered out hatching areas where you have to hatch with really clean tone that look really nice because the pencil strokes add a little bit of vibration, a little bit of activity. It's interesting. And if you're just smudging everywhere in order to keep it clean, then yeah, you're not getting any of that little details in the halftones. Not to say that it's wrong to smudge. Sometimes you want areas of a smoother texture without any hatching marks. Great, but it's much easier to do that than to keep clean tones with the pencil. So that's why I want you guys to train to do that right now. Usually that's not the problem. The problem is over smudging. Okay, so looking for more dark halftones, definitely around the lip. Pretty much I'm seeing like the only areas where I would put a light halftone are maybe around the edge of the lip here and maybe a little bit in this bottom right here. And so everything else, I'm going to bring it back down to that. Sometimes as I'm filling in the dark halftone, I might notice that parts of my shadows were filled in a little bit too light. Like in the lip, it's definitely lighter than everything else. So I need to go back in and kind of darken it a little bit. Otherwise, there's no room for my halftone. It just starts looking too much like the shadow. This whole area just has a lot of this dark halftone. Yeah, I just keep finding parts of my shadows that I just wish were a little bit darker. Okay, right here is another darker halftone between the eyes. This whole thing right here is just the darker halftone. And there's going to be a lot of areas where the edge of the shadow is just going to have another edge of dark halftone next to it. Like, for example, from here to here, in order to get to the light, there's little steps of dark halftone, light halftone, and then maybe highlight. I might not even make that a highlight. That's going to be just a lighter halftone. But it's going to be a step towards the lighter halftone. So I have to put the darker halftone in here. And then same thing here, there's a little gradation. So I put a little step. Dark halftone. This is dark halftone. And actually this entire area right here inside the hair. The split between the hair. Getting a little messy here. Okay, then another little step of dark halftone in here. Now this whole cheek right here has the full value range here. We put the shadow, then a lot of this is going to be dark halftone, and then the side plane of the cheek right here has a little dark halftone coming in. Okay, and then also in the transition from the shadow of the jaw, there's gonna be a dark halftone. Very skinny. It's a very thin transition, but it's there. And then same thing in the nose. A little bit of a transition right here. And right there as well. The bridge of the nose, probably the skinniest of the transitions, but it's there. Okay, and probably a little bit down here as well. But again, these are just little graphic shapes. I'm not following exactly what I'm seeing in the reference. Okay, so that's the third value. So that's the dark halftone, that's pretty much done. I have two more values left. I have the lightest halftone, and then I have the darkest shadow. I got the two extremes. And when I do the lightest halftone, that's also doing my highlights as well, because that's just the white of the paper, and I'm gonna do the lightest halftones around those. I have to decide which one I want to do first, and I think I'm going to go back into the shadow.
Go back to the shadow!
I keep going into the shadow and cleaning it up as I'm doing the halftones, so I'm going to go back into the shadow with the darkest dark and establish that, just to separate it out, separate that shadow out from the halftones even more. So going all the way to my 6B, and most of the hair is going to be covered up. Remember, it's that really, really dark black that's popping forward. This darkest dark, that's what I'm about to do. Mostly it's in the hair, and then a little bit occasionally, like eyebrows, the eyes, nostrils, and a few spots on the lips. And that's it, maybe, and also a little bit here. I'll just start with the hair, because it's the biggest part. So the highlight is right in here, and I just want to design around it. Now the ear isn't part of the hair, so these little shadows are going to stay as that, the lighter shadow value. Okay, so here I'm actually going to have to start going with the strands, because the highlight shape is going this way, and my strokes kind of have to follow that zigzag pattern. But I'm not thinking of the individual strands, I'm thinking of this shape that is created in here, and I'm just shading around it. I really want to emphasize that point to you guys, that you want to avoid thinking of the strands for as long as possible. I'm designing the shape of the highlight. That's it. There's some little strands in here. There's some really thin ones that kind of show up. Even when I squint, they look like dark shapes, but I'm gonna simplify it just because those are little details that I do not want to get into at the moment, because they're not part of the volume. They're not explaining the form of what I'm drawing. Like the highlights that I'm putting in the hair, they do explain the form. They're showing the roundness of the big chunks of hair. The hair kind of flowing down the face is not doing any of that. It's not a plane. Remember, going back to the concept of this is a sculpture. If this was a sculpture, I wouldn't make like a thin piece of, hair coming down that way. I would try to think about how is this a part of the chunk, and I would probably just chunk it in with this stuff. If you wouldn't be able to sculpt it with a chisel, then it's probably too much of a detail for this specific exercise, not generally in drawing. Okay, so in here, there's a few shapes as well. You'll be surprised, we're actually getting pretty close to finishing this. Like once we get through all the values, all 5 that is, it's gonna look pretty good. I mean, highly stylized, right? This is like a graphic design or something. But still, it'll feel like a completed drawing. And you'll be surprised how good it can look, how much detail you can get, even when you simplify this much. This does kind of reveal to you like how much of the effect of a drawing is achieved through details and subtlety, and how much of it is achieved through these bigger ideas, these very simple concepts. Because this definitely doesn't get you all the way. Like, this is not a fully rendered thing, but so much of the idea of this portrait is captured through this very, very simple process. Highly simplified shapes, highly simplified values, and completely simplified edges, just down to one edge. This whole shape pretty much just needs to get darker. I'm not going to add any more detail into it, I'm just going to darken it. Maybe the only thing I could do is maybe add a few indications of these windows in here, and those would be like this value. It's not going to be the like lights, it's going to be slightly lighter shadow showing through inside of the hair shape. That, for example, like a little one showing through, maybe one or two more, like maybe around the edge, fake the transition. And I think I'm going to keep the background white. I don't think I'm going to do it the way I did it in the thumbnail. So just leaving a little bit of the lighter shadow in areas around this edge will just kind of give an effect of soft hair transitions, but not really. This training of being able to simplify things, you're going to actually use this in every drawing you do, because you don't want everything in your drawing to be fully rendered out and full of detail just like in the photo, unless you're going for a complete photorealistic thing. Like if that's what you want to do, then yeah, you might not really be simplifying anywhere. But most people, most artists I know, they will keep areas of their drawing simple, and that makes the areas that are more detailed feel more detailed because they're surrounded by areas of simplicity. Look at some of these master artists who use areas of simplicity around the perimeters or in areas where they just don't want to draw your attention. They don't want your eye to look there. They'll keep those areas very, very simple, pretty much like what we're doing here, where they put only a few values, one or two values. The shapes are very basic, very little texture, very little contrast. Having those little areas of rest in the drawing are really nice. They're nice balance. They make a drawing just feel more like a drawing, like it was done by a person. It was a solved problem rather than a photo that was taken that captured reality exactly. It's stylized. It's got an opinion. And I'll do the same thing here. In order to give this feeling of feathering over here, I'm going to leave a little bit of the lighter shadow on the edge. Okay, so that's all the dark accents in the hair and on the perimeter, and I'm going to jump into the face. So basically the eyebrow, I'm seeing like a little split in here. That's kind of cool. So I'll do a little dark accent here, then I'll space, and then dark accent the rest of the eyebrow. And then the entire eye here is pretty much a dark shadow. Sorry, not the whole eye actually. There's parts within it that are lighter, but there's a shadow here, and then the iris, little circle, is dark. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for this area. Now just jumping in over to the other side, make sure it's at the right angle. And remember to keep even these shapes simple. They're very detailed, small shapes, just because we can't avoid it. They are eyes. It's kind of like the ear where you just have a bunch of little shapes. I mean, technically we could simplify it. We could just put like a square or like a big rectangle there or something, or a triangle, and it'll still look like, oh, there's a dark part in the eye. But we can just choose to put a little bit more smaller shapes just in these little areas, just like how we chose to put a little shape here and a little shape here. Just very calculated, very specific areas that we choose to put details in, and then everything else feels more detailed because there's a few areas of detail. But even then, I'm trying to keep the shapes simple. Little squares or triangles, straight lines everywhere. Okay, and then the nostril, other side, pretty much just a little triangle. See how both of these are pretty simple shapes. This is like a little elongated rectangle that's tapered, and then this is a triangle. And then this cast shadow, man, that is that is really dark. Makes me really want to make this into just a darker shape completely. Yeah, that looks better. It separates the nose from the cheek. And right there. And then a few dark accents in here. Like for example, right in the corner of the lips where it gets really deep, there's a dark shape in there. On the other side as well. Actually, I think I made his bottom lip too thick. Remember, like I said, it's never too late to make a correction to the shapes. And then under the lip here, there is this darker little pocket, like that. And wow, I feel like we might actually be done. Oh wait, no, we're not. We got a full value left, the light halftones. But yeah, we're done with this step. So now moving on to the lightest pencil, which is an HB. You could even go to like a 2H if you'd like. In fact, maybe I will. So yeah, I'm gonna use a mechanical pencil just so I could get some really crisp halftones in there. I'll start at the top and just work my way down. The highlight I'm seeing here is one little guy right here and another one more horizontal across the top of the brow ridge right there. I'm just gonna shade around those. It's a light halftone. It might be kind of hard for you guys to see this just because it's so light. Little halftone in here. And then in the cheek, the highlight I'm seeing is right here. And so I'll just shade around that. And then in the nose, I am seeing more than one value in there because there's a lot of different plane changes, but hey, we gotta simplify it. So all I could show is that little highlight and then everything else in here just has to be flattened out. That's okay. We're practicing our discipline in simplifying. And then everything else down here is all halftone. I'm not seeing any highlights down in the cheek. So get a nice clean light halftone value filled in for this whole remaining part of the jaw. For the ear, a lot of little highlights. Maybe I'll just choose a few that I want to really kind of pop. And that's almost done. And just maybe see if I want to put anything in the collar here. There is a little shape that I want to put in as a small halftone, like here. Okay, and one more thing that's been bugging me is this light part around the lip. Just looks like a milk mustache. I want to make sure I have it at least at that lightest halftone value, so it doesn't look like a highlight. And also this one in here, it is kind of a highlight, but because it's on the lip, which is darker, it's also gonna have a light halftone like that. Oh shoot, there is one dark accent I forgot. Some of you probably caught it and have been just holding back, punching the screen. It's the other eyebrow. It's been missing this whole time. I don't know how I didn't see it. Yeah, you guys have probably just been yelling at the screen. Okay, now we're done. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson.